Hey guys, Justin here with JHart Modelworks coming to you with another update on the Revell Monogram 37 Ford pickup. A lot's been done, but it doesn't really look like a lot has been done. Basically, I've worked on a lot of little things getting ready for some big stuff that's going to be coming up later, but that, the major assembly is kind of being hung up by a few other things. We'll talk about that. I'm going to go ahead and get this camera flipped around and we'll take a look at where we're at. Alright guys, here we are. We're going to go ahead and start with the frame, our engine. You've seen most of this already, but it wasn't actually assembled. It is now fully assembled. So our engine is in place. Our drive shaft is fully assembled and it's in place. And that meets up nicely with our transmission back here. We have our fuel tank is in, all of our rear suspension, our front suspension is done as well. That is looking really good. So we have made our own exhaust. This is the kit exhaust. It does that little U-loop to get to the other side. I am not fond of this exhaust at all. So I had said from the word go I was going to custom do my exhaust. So the mufflers are from Mr. Model. I've got a couple of sets of these. I think I have one more set left. The actual exhaust pipes have been done with some of this 1/16 inch solder. It's interesting. This is the first time doing solder for my exhausts. And it's soft, it bends, it keeps its shape somewhat. I mean, it keeps its shape, but if you hit it at all, it gets out of shape. That just runs from the muffler up here to the exhaust headers. And then it runs out the other side of the mufflers. It's not drilled all the way through. This is the second piece. And I ran it up over the axle and then back under through here. Now you may notice these little plates. I 3D modeled these plates, and these go all the way through. These are one piece, and they just slide into the gaps that are there for the exhaust to run through. This frame is made for dual exhausts. It's not made for a single exhaust. It's got all the openings to run second exhaust all the way down. And this was the first edition. This was not the new one that you can get in Hobby Lobby right now. This is the first printing of this kit. So it was designed to do dual exhausts. But I didn't do it up here. I didn't want to run any kind of problems with, fitting underneath the cab. These sit perfectly flush, and I have no interference. And just with that angle, it's just hard to get to model up that piping that passed through, but I kind of felt that looked a little better than just having the holes in there, and it gives it more stability. So it's not just flopping around, it's stable in there. So these are, I print a whole bunch of spares just in case, but this is the first design. This is the one that goes right up here. I then also printed up and design some of these. The initial plan was just to put them right here, and it just holds the exhaust pipe away from the frame. It makes it more stable. It's easier to, it looks better, and it doesn't flop around. And then I got to this side and I was like, well, I could put a set right here as well, and those help also. I think they look good there. Nothing interferes with anything. It sets up into the chassis with no problems at all, but everything looks a little bit more stable and it feels a little bit more stable. Nothing flops around in here. So on the fuel tank, I sanded off the drain. I added a ProTech bolt head. I think that's a 0.3 millimeter I've got a 0. I think that's a 3 or a 4. That might be a 3 as well. I've got a bolt head here for the drain plug for the oil pan also. I am really happy with how that all turned out. As y'all have seen from the previous video, we have the bed all painted up. The chassis is pretty much ready to go. Everything sits really nice in here. But I've left these a little long, and my plan is once I get the bed assembled and I get the frame into the chassis and I get the bumper in place and I see where things are going to end, I'm going to come back in here with some aluminum tubing and I'm going to make exhaust tips, and I'll trim it back where I need to be to get those tips to look good and make everything flush and even. But I want to hold off on like trimming anything way back until after I get like the bumpers in and I get the frame like fully into where it needs to be and I have a better idea of where things are going to line up. So that will be later on. Also with our chassis, we have our radiator glued in, and where it sits, our lower exhaust pipe coming off the engine hit just about perfectly on the points. As you can see down there, there are 2 points where those lower radiator hoses connect. It's kind of hard to see at this angle because the light is terrible. Get out of the way, wire. But we pretty much hit dead on with our lower radiator hoses. Might come in just a little bit with a long pair of tweezers and tweak that once we get it finally installed, but that should be really close. So the headlights aren't ready yet, but I thought that they sat down onto these posts more securely. They don't. They just flush fit on top, which makes me a little sad because that's not going to be stable at all. So my plan is to come in and drill these with like a 0.5 millimeter bit and just put a piece of metal rod in the bottom of the mirrors so that I can pin them in place and they will hold a little more stable and be more secure so they don't get bumped or broken or anything like that. We have come in and we have polished out all of our dust nibs. There was one like right there. It's gone. That's all been sanded and polished up. As well as the one that was here. There's still just the slightest imperfection here, but I've sanded and polished this so much I don't want to run the risk of burning through that clear and damaging on my paint. The nib itself is gone. There's just the slightest distortion where it used to be. So I'm happy enough with that. I'm going to leave that where it's at. Once I got it polished, because it only takes so long to sand and polish, I don't like doing it. But once I needed to get it done, so I got it knocked out because I didn't want to do these window frames before getting it polished. I didn't want to get polish on here and end up shining these. So I went ahead and did the backs and the sides. The actual glass itself has a trim, but it's actually a chrome trim. So on all of my reference pictures that I've seen on like Binger trailer or whatnot, there's a rubber seal around the side and the back windows. Then the front has chrome trim on it. I have to figure out what I'm going to do with the mirrors. There's a mirror that's supposed to go here, and it kind of glues into that hole, and it includes like the other hinge. But there's just the hinge over here. So what I may do is just make a second mirror that wraps around this hinge and then just comes out. Even though I don't like having just one mirror, it drives me nuts. Additionally, I've come in here and I have sprayed Tamiya's metallic gray. I forget what the number is on it, but it's just a metal gray. It's going to give me kind of a bare metal look for the top of the interior. And you don't have to worry about this because this is going to be covered by that interior tub. So that's all good and ready to go. Remember we had, was it this one? Yeah, it was this one. With a small dust nib right in here. And that has been polished out. Although I may come back in and polish this again. One more time. You can kind of see just a little bit of, there was a piece of hair on the last polishing. One of those, I don't know how it got there. It was like a cat hair or something had gotten on the polishing pad. And there's just the slightest imperfection in the clear. It's almost like you took it through the gas station car wash and it got some swirlies on there. So I may come back in there and repolish this just to get rid of that. But as far as the dust nib goes, it's gone. And that's nice and clean. I'm using the Trizac pads. I went with the 3000, the 5000, and the 8000. I didn't see a need to go 1000. I didn't have any major junk in any of the clear at all. I just had like 3 or 4 tiny little nibs. So that's all I needed to get rid of was just tiny, tiny little nibs and then polish it back out. So the 3, 5, and 8 were perfect. All right, let's go ahead and look at the interior stuff. We haven't got a lot done. Well, we've got a lot done. It just doesn't look like we've got a lot done. The tub has been primered. I'm looking at how I want to paint this seat. I'm probably going to go with a Ferrari chocolate brown, maybe saddle tan. I wanted to do a nice darker rich brown, like maybe a mix of the saddle tan and the chocolate, and then come in and just lighten up the seat areas, like where the driver and the passenger would sit. And I saw a technique that involved using a dryer sheet, like a used dryer sheet. And you're supposed to lay it down and spray it, and it gives you that kind of leathery texture. I'm very glad I tried that on a piece of sheet plastic and didn't just try it straight on the seat, because that did not work for me. That was terrible. Looked really bad. It did not give me a texture at all. It just kind of made like light tan clouds over the entire surface. It did not work out for me. One of these days, I'm going to figure out a way to get a nice kind of worn leather, but not really distressed, like no rips and tears, and just, you know, light, maybe just a little bit of a crackly texture. I don't know. There's got to be a way to do it. I just haven't figured out how to do it yet, but I need to get some brown on these seats, and I need to figure out what color I'm going to do the sides, whether I'm going to leave it black like this, or if I want to come in and do the metal gray on these sides as well. I may leave it black. That'll give it like almost like a leather sides look. It's going to be pretty dark in there anyhow, so you're not really going to notice it too much. So I also think that the black will give us more of a pop for the chrome, for the window cranks, as well as the door handles. I think those will stand out better against the black than they will against the metal gray. But I don't want to do the entire interior in black, and that gray bounces a little bit of light around inside there. It's already going to be dark in there as it is. I have 3D modeled and printed up and painted up some dome lights. I've got about 2 of these. One looks better than the other. They don't look great, but that's just because I hand painted the white, and I'm not real happy with how it turned out, but it is what it is. But yeah, we've got a dome light to go right up in the top up in here. It'll look something like that. It won't be on the supports. It'll be flush. I will break all the support stuff off, and it'll just be that flat surface underneath there. But it'll sit like somewhere in the middle, about like that. There we go. It'll sit kind of flat like that, somewhere near the center. We have our dashboard. Our dash is looking good. I hit these buttons with a silver marker, but every time I handle it, the marker rubs off. So I'm going to have to come back in with something more substantial, maybe like a Tamiya silver or something, and come in here and paint these buttons again. I also printed up some of my ignition switches, so I'm going to put one of those right in about there. I think that'll look really nice. They're not the greatest detail, but they're there. It'll add just a little something extra in here. We have our drive shaft, and I have a slight conundrum. Part of me wants to drill this from the side and glue in like an insect pin, or maybe a piece of 0.3 millimeter metal rod, something to just serve as a turn signal stock. But I'm concerned about drilling through this. I don't want to run the risk of, breaking it in half while I'm drilling it because I don't get it centered or something. So I'm thinking about it. I'm still really thinking about drilling the side of the steering column and putting in a turn signal stock. Haven't decided yet though. And we have our steering wheels. I've 3D printed up a banjo steering wheel. I forget who I got this from, but I did get it off Colts 3D. So I painted one in blue. And I think I kind of lose it against the dashboard. I also painted one up in a wood grain, like a burl wood. And I think that's going to stand out a lot better in this interior. I think that's what I'm going to go with. I think that'll look a lot nicer. My very first video on this channel was a tutorial on how to do this wood effect. It's very similar to how I do the wood for the panels, but instead of doing like streaks, you basically stab with a beat up brush. You go in and you stab it with a light tan and a black, and then you cover over it in clear orange, and that gets you your wood effect. But that's our steering wheel. Our firewall is just about done. I am going to come in here and add a small sheet of aluminum to this, and I'm going to give it a fold so that it just comes straight up a little bit, like maybe 1 millimeter or a ½ millimeter, just enough to give it that lip. As we have our battery, which is going to sit in here, and I just want something just come up just a little bit to look like it's holding that battery in place. I'm also going to put a small strip of metal over the top and maybe some ½ millimeter rod coming off the sides to look like it's bolted down. That'll give it more of a retention. I do need to get my decals, my Optima decals for the top and the front of the battery. I've got them made up. They're on the sheet with the rest of my decals. I need to print that out. So I need to do that soon as well. I had to ask the professor of sprue, Old Tom, what this was, because I had no idea. Apparently that's an old school starter solenoid. So the positive line is going to come in here, I promise. It's going to come out the other side. It's then going to come down and it's going to run down to the starter. And our negative will run down, and that's going to go either to the block or it's going to go to the frame. So thank you, Tom, for telling me what this is, because I had no clue. Our wheels are done. I know I showed you these on the last update, but I have since painted the tires and have this all fully assembled. And I'm still debating whether I want to leave it open with the lug nuts and the gunmetal hub, or if I want to put the hubcap in place. I mean, that gives it a nice clean look. But leaving that hubcap off gives us those details, those tiny little bits where those lug nuts are, and I think that's like a really cool look. I don't know. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Do Do you think we should go with the hubcap or go with the bare bolts? What else do we have? Do we have anything else? Oh, yes, we do. For the dashboard, I have 3D modeled up and printed the T-handle that would open and close this vent on the actual truck. It is slightly out of scale. I'm not gonna lie. This is probably closer to like 1/24th scale. There we go. I have a hole drilled in there for it. So it's just a little bit large, but that's okay. It's going to be inside that dark cab anyhow, so it's going to be hard to see. Being a little bit oversized, it'll be a little more noticeable. But we'll make sure we get that straight when we glue it in. But that's going to be about how that's going to sit. And that'll sit in there about like that. So I like it. A little bit more detail, like I said. Always a little bit of detail. Small details build up to big, nice models. The little things add up. And one more thing to go over. I think this is the last thing to go over. I have 3D modeled fire extinguisher. Now the way I designed this, it's designed in 4 parts. You've got the head and the bottle. That way they can be very easily painted separately. You get your head silver, your bottle red or whatever, and then you just glue the head in place. The top is separate from the bottom on the bracket. And that's because with these arms in place, you can't get the bottle inside the bracket. So what you do is you assemble your fire extinguisher, you slide it in place in the bracket, then you come in with the top part, and you slide it in from the back so that those little arms go around the bottle, not the neck, but the bottle, the neck part of the bottle, but you see a little better there. So that little U-shaped silver arm, I painted it silver, slides around the top of the bottle and glues in. Just put a little bit of glue on the top, and there's a little recess in there that holds a little tab to line everything up. When you get it glued into place, you're not going to see the back, so it's perfectly fine. I've got a little mounting plate on the back that makes it more stable. I originally just had the small little square and it flopped around while I was trying to position it. With this larger plate on the back, it sits a lot nicer. Now this is the front of the bed on the inside. So I'm going to drop this in just like this. And it's going to sit about like that, right inside the bed. Again, just little things, you know. Little things that'll be on nobody else's 37 Ford pickup. So that is my fire extinguisher with the mounting bracket. The design file for this is for sale on my Quilts 3D page. There's a link down in the description below to all of my design files. I will probably put a link up there in the corner as well. If you have your own printer, you can purchase the design files for these and print these off yourself. I think that's going to wrap it up for this one. So I think my main focus needs to be on the interior for right now, because once I get that interior wrapped up and I can get the cab fully assembled, then I'll be ready to drop the bed on, get the bed in place, drop that cab into place, drop that all onto the chassis, and then start working on the outside of the truck. So yeah, like I said, there's a whole lot done, but it doesn't look like I did a whole lot because I'm just kind of getting things ready for bigger things to come. So that's going to wrap up this video, guys. Thanks for hanging out. I always appreciate you watching the videos and building with me, and I will catch you guys on the next one.